Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Scouting for Growth. I'm Sabine VdL, and today we have a guest who has built ventures where others talk about them. Please join me in welcoming Stephen Brittain. Stephen is the co-founder of InsurTech Gateway, a pioneering venture builder focused on bringing early-stage startups into the heart of the insurance world, a regulated industry, as many of you might already know, that typically moves at glacial speed. Over the past decade, Stephen has helped launch and scale ventures inside one of the most regulated, risk-averse business sector on the planet. And yes, it is the insurance space. He has been the spark for innovation inside large insurance corporates and the strategic partner for founders who wanted to navigate the labyrinth of regulation, procurement, and distribution at scale. In other words, he has been solving the archetypical how to innovate inside a large enterprise question while keeping the spirit of a startup alive. Now, to set the scene for our conversation, first, the venture client model is emerging as a key driver of innovation in regulated industries, as I mentioned before. Companies with a dedicated venture client unit are 64% likely to run 10 plus startup pilots versus only 20% for those without. Second, in insurance, AI is no longer a distant promise, and I think that is across enterprise level organizations, right? It is delivering already. Leading insurers have improved underwriting efficiency by up to 36% and achieved a 3% point improvement in loss ratio via smarter data. Third, legacy systems are dragging insurers down, or any industries which are relying on core systems. But those modernizing have seen operational cost cut of 40 to 60% in year one after a core platform upgrade. So let's dive in, right? Stephen, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the Scouting for Growth podcast. Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining me on Scouting for Growth today.
Sabine, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I really enjoyed a little bit of lunch with you as well, where we actually started unpacking what is happening in our industry and adjacent industries as well. But before going into that, I would love for you to give us a little bit of an introduction of who is Stephen and how Stephen went into one of the oldest industry, right, insurance, and what you wanted to achieve there.
Well, that's a nice open question to start. So my name is Stephen Brittain. I'm an Englishman that found himself in insurance. I think I'm not the 100th person that may have spoken to you and said, how did I get here? But I was a product designer, a service designer, and I found myself just by building bigger and bigger products that I was coming up against risk, and I saw risk as a constraint, and I knew that if I could only understand risk better, that I might be able to do some bigger and bolder and better projects. So I guess it was me outgrowing product design. Mm-hmm. And I met a few individuals. I mean, I have to say, before I came to insurance, I wouldn't have dreamed of being here. It was a couple of individuals that showed me, and one being Rob Lumley and the other being Richard Chattock, who explained to me the creative potential of this industry, or should I say of the insurance business models, and what we could really do with it once we could harness risk, enable people to play in and play on risk. I got very excited about its potential.
Yeah. But in insurance, we can't do speculative risk, right? We cannot gamble. So the, transformation of the insurance value chain has often to be looked into very different ways. And I remember when we met, there was 9 years ago, when we started InsurTech Gateway. I remember you coming to Startup Bootcamp with some of your startups, looking at the problem of insurance in a different lens, enabling, I would say, the user to find coverage at the time. I think it was bags and laptops. That was, I guess, the first organization that we talked about. And I remember going to conferences and trying to support their vision as to how they could product the Gen Z. So, insurance is not always easy. It's one of those industries we often say we have fallen into insurance. A word we should not say, right? It's a risk industry. There's so many opportunities we can actually look into. But what did you discover when you started 9 years ago to unpack, trying to move the layers of insurance to find solution, I guess, for the customer first?
Well, it's interesting, the one you mentioned, In My Bag. Gosh, I haven't spoken of that idea for so long. But I think the early days were definitely that sense that insurance had a bad rap, had a bad image, and that we just needed to modernize it for a new generation. We needed to make it more dynamic, more friendly. And I think that, that comes with the naivety of being an outsider and thinking it was just another service design problem, a reputational challenge. But it's big and it's deep and it's complex in itself. And I think I very quickly understood that it was going to be very hard to change the hearts and minds of an entire generation. And that the real beauty of the insurance, some of the insurance models how do I put this? I pivoted my thinking quite quickly. That the opportunity was not to try and make insurance sexy. It was to look at the secret powers of insurance, to create mutual models, to work at scale, to unlock lending, to put trust into ecosystems that didn't exist before, rather than to kind of look at the retail space. I think that's what you do when you're new, because that's the only interaction you have with insurance. But it doesn't take many steps in to realize that there's a lot more to play with.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot more to play with. And I guess over time you help us, our industry, turn an industry allergic to experimentation, because when we look at product design, really understand the customer, we have to experiment, test and learn, and see really what fits within the playground of entrepreneurs. So looking back, what were the key levers? Was it for you the mindset, the capital, the regulatory constraint we often see and have in the industry that made you shift and identify new possibilities?
You definitely set the right corners of the canvas. The mindset, the capital, the regulatory space. But I think that they were the enablers of the thing I had been missing, which was just time to experiment. Imagine if there was a place where we could explore ideas and prototype almost as if there were a non-regulated space, as if everybody wasn't terrified of the downside of everything we were doing. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself borrowing from sort of medical labs, the way that pharmaceuticals develop, kind of non-live solutions, just looking at dispensing, delivery, messaging, as much as looking at and also creating a sandbox. So I think we were very early in the journey. If I'm winding back the brain to 2017, but the brief we made internally was, how do we make this feel like an environment where big ideas could be explored? Mm-hmm. So it was that way round. How do we create an environment rather than what's the next idea? So we kind of made and that was very much a sense that once we've cracked that, we can invite anybody to play, from any client, business, any domain, because we've removed those barriers to experimentation. And so we went to the FCA. At the time, they were just doing the regulatory sandbox. And I have to say, through the charm school of Robert Lumley, we were given a chance to run with them in parallel. And we also had our own AR that we could delegate. So that effectively gave us the responsibility and the opportunity to test small ideas. Yeah. And I think that was a language that hadn't been, I certainly just, my first interactions, and stop me if I'm going too far, but now that I've started to remember it, is that an idea was only really a new idea was only good if it had 30,000 customers, or if it was proven. But that in itself was the impossible step to make. How could we possibly get 20,000 people interested in an idea that might take 2 years to get regulated and another 2 years to get paper? Yeah. So if we could just get a little version of that, and we could just do the big learning on small numbers. So we coined the phrase little monsters. And little monsters was like, don't worry, it may look terrifying to you. You see the downside, but the spider is only 2 millimeters big.
Yeah.
And it's not going to hurt us. It's going to be really beneficial to the ecosystem if we make it work.
Yeah.
So it was really, the intention was like a Petri dish where we weren't just getting regulatory permissions. We were testing live businesses, a live fire environment where we could test the real things like, would people really go through the sales and buying process? Did it really add value? Did they actually buy it when they said they might? And that level of research you just couldn't do.
Yeah.
So we were trying to recreate what the medical industry had done 20 years earlier.
Well, fascinating, because, some of the techniques we've used to actually test, product market fits has been using, platform like LinkedIn and Facebook to actually create landing pages and see whether people would click. And then, as you get through the journey, see whether they would buy as well. And we all know the Tesla example with the fake Lotus, in the showroom, which actually enable Elon Musk to actually test whether people would buy Tesla by providing an LOI, right? Deciding and signing literally a mini contract to say, you know what, when the car is going to be delivered, I would buy one, which they had enough of them to get investment to back them. And I think in insurance, we've tried to do that. Maybe at the time it was 30,000, but now I would say some of the insurers realize you don't need that much validation because we have all this capability, digital capability to test. And I also remember, as you remembered in my bag, I also remember, Laka, for example, who was also in the FCA sandbox and built a model which was, credit plus insurance together. So they had to be in the sandbox and also had to learn how to actually shape the proposition while meeting the need of the regulator, but at the same time, also convincing the insurers. And I have to say, at the time, imagine 8 years ago, Zurich was, for example, one of the first interested party to actually start a disruptive business model, things which may actually bring customer in different light within the industry.
I remember Toby.
Remember? Yeah.
I remember Toby coming up to me and asking for a hug.
Yeah.
He said, now I've realized why this is so tough. Now I realize why I should have come to see you. He said, I said, could you write that on my website?
And Jens, Toby, still dear to my heart and doing very well, as founders. They were recently as part of a competition and, I was really happy to see that they were actually mentioned as part of that competition as, inspiring competition, which judging is going to come out very soon.
Okay.
But if you were, starting InsurTech Gateway and actually explain a little bit more about what InsurTech Gateway premise were about, in the age of AI and automation, now it's all about artificial intelligence, automation, augmentations. What would you do differently to accelerate the founders' momentum and also, gain that regulatory approval that often require many weeks, right? Can we do things in 6 weeks or 90 days now? Things which would not have been able to do 9 to 10 years ago.
Well, it's interesting. If I may step back a moment, because I think the question of what the Gateway's original intention was to find amazing founders and fast track them into market, and to do with enough energy and with enough creative energy to survive, adapt, and evolve in an environment that meant that basically your first idea had to be your fixed idea. So I think it was, if I go back to the original design brief, how would it help us today attract great founders and give them greater agility to learn and evolve, because no one ever knows what to do when they first start. It's a learning journey. Yeah. So greater discovery, greater agility. And then when they get to that momentum piece, how do we make them even more self-aware where they are on the journey so they can iterate and evolve their own businesses, because some of them fail to adapt.
Yes.
And I think that is we may come back to that later. One of the biggest challenges in InsurTech is that what looked great on day one didn't evolve to the opportunity they had in front of them. They were just still on their first idea. And then how do they get a successful outcome? And I think when I look across now, looking at 9 years, I think how could AI be used? How as an enabler of innovation, not just getting into market, but now sitting on a portfolio of 45 companies with many in Series A and B. The questions are equally valid. How do they get out? How do they stabilize, as much as how do I find the next one and help them get into market? So forgive me if I'm, when I look at AI, I'm sort of looking at our own value chain, the InsurTech Gateway's value chain. So I think I think if I start at the beginning, like if we were to start again, I think I would start with firstly, it's about expectation of all our LPs and stakeholders. What do we hope to achieve in the next 10 years? I think I'm now a person that looks back on the next journey as long as the last journey. It took 10 years to get here. It's going to take 10 years to get to somewhere meaningful again. So what's this next paradigm going to do to get us there? And how do we, am I going into too much detail?
No, it's great. But actually what I was going to ask you is, it took 10 years to get there. Did you think it would take 10 years to get there?
A good point, actually. Yes. In the context of, yes, I think I thought it would be done in 3. I certainly energized for 3. And I energized the people around me. I set expectations that we would be having early exits, partial exits, and that would recycle as a model. And that was my enthusiasm and naivety, which gets you so far. And that cycle, in truth, that cycle probably would have taken 5 years, but COVID put a wobble into it.
Absolutely.
That recycling, as in, when I mean recycling, I mean cash in, cash out. For anybody investing in early stage ideas, we all look at that cycle as being pretty important. That is what gives Silicon Valley its energy, is that everybody you speak to is kind of on free money. They're investing the money they won the first time around. And the trouble with InsurTech is we haven't had that cycle. And I think that's really changed the flavour of a lot of other, by the way, not just InsurTech, but anything with a tech suffix to it, is we haven't had enough of that cycling going on.
Yeah. When you start looking at the investment, right, we've seen 2021 was like in billions of investment. Before coming and speaking with you, I was just checking the numbers. 408 billion has been invested in artificial intelligence. Just this year, 151 billion has been invested in AI startups. So think about everything AI, including generative AI. And some, as you know, have received massive investment rounds. Now, when I look at InsurTech, within fintech, it's always been around 10%. Around 90 billion has been invested in InsurTech. Well, this year is around 6.7 billion. And actually, probably those who got the investment are what I call AI InsurTechs. So when you start looking at the evolution of what we are doing, how do we make sure that first, those startups which we have invested in, some probably are B2B ventures, can find their first customer so that they can get the next investment round? And I think second, what do you think is the framework we need to actually play around to make sure that those solutions are welcomed by the customer, maybe me, but also potentially business partners, the corporates who are out there?
I think in terms of in 2025, where are we? We've all been doing this for 10 years. I can smell a pattern. I can see a pattern. I can smell an opportunity much better than I ever could. I think we'll have the experience now of seeing the same idea 100 times, of seeing the nuances and seeing the key factors of defensibility or market engagement and traction. So I think our pattern recognition has never been stronger. I think the cost to experiment has never been lower.
Yes.
And I think maybe that's the bit that people get excited about is that the cost to experiment is so low. Generally, it's so low. The third point, I think, is the engagement within the large industry, the technical expertise of the insurance market. Has it got easier for people to access it? I don't know. You might be a better judge of this. But I think those 3 points of it's cheaper to experiment. I think we recognize what works and what doesn't much, much better. But can we validate it with an insurer and get them on side? I think we still need to work out that connectivity. Basically, because it's so diverse what we do and so diverse what they do.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just you have to just pick your moment and try and find the right person who
right person, the right company. And I would say, in times where a lot of those organizations are trying to redefine what innovation is for them. What is corporate innovation? Do we do internal innovation? Now with AI, we can do everything to get ourselves. Or do we use open innovation frameworks and actually welcome external partners to help us? And then the last one is, therefore, these external partners may be scale-up, maybe startups, to actually avoid having us build new technology, manage new technology, but just leverage SaaS, software as a service, enablers to actually help us move faster. All these, I think, come into the equation. But I think when you start looking at the industry, because it's risk-averse, it's probably the fewer than the many, I think. I always look at it from a Fortune 500, the top 10, who is doing something. But we have probably over 5,000 companies in insurance today. And so I think that early adopter, fast follower, and laggard actually is quite wide in the industry. And it can actually make founders really tired and exhausted to try to enter our industry.
Well, there's one thing that, as a theme, I've always been fascinated with insurance as the kind of last to the party, and that's not how insurance wants to talk about innovation. They want to talk about what is that? Anything with InsurTech or InsurTech innovation, you think it's going to be cutting edge. But one thing I recognized is, and this is a big generalism, but I think if you can work with innovators and you understand risk, then and you can help unlock that innovation, you can make it sustain. I mean, my definition of sustainability is certainly within the context of insurance and risk is how do we find a long-term, stable, multi-stakeholder, it works solutions for some of the big technology paradigms. So some of my favorite examples of how I would describe it, InsurTech, and I know over lunch we came up with new words, and maybe we should take this opportunity to rename this. But when there's an Uber, so that famous phrase, isn't there, where the invention of, was it the invention of the shipwreck? Was the invention of insurance for shipwrecks? I've got this. There's a better way of
saying it.
Maybe
we
we'll
studied
remember
lots of London 340 years ago.
Yeah,
so there would definitely be a ship somewhere.
There's a ship, yeah, but as in insurance doesn't invent the ship. It's more like, we meet. Oh, I've really messed up this. It's a bit Alan Partridge moment here. But my point, my better example about the real life is Uber invented this completely disruptive way of booking cars. Yeah. And then we ended up with 500,000 drivers with no agency, no protection, no maternity, sickness cover, can't get basic, can't become a tenant, don't have decent contract. So you end up with a secondary problem behind these incredible tech paradigms. And that is only manifested in every corner where there's been technology. There's been a lagging behind a protection. Yes. And I feel this, and I use that as almost like we talked about the hype cycle before. Like I've always seen that those of us that think about including everybody, inclusivity. Yep. We spoke about that.
Insurability, affordability, inclusivity.
The idea of making it work for everybody. How do we make 0 hours contracts work for everybody? Well, how about the innovators who understand insurance get around the table and try to smooth this out? Yeah. We don't need to smooth this out. The billions went over here, but then a lot of vulnerability that followed it. And that's got to be behind every major industry shift, whether they're working from home or taking drones to work. There's going to be a void that's created with every big technical step. So I just want to be as close to innovation as possible to make it work for everybody. I think that's the true design problem.
It is a design problem, and we know we have a protection gap, which is $1.8 trillion, according to Swiss Re. And some of the terms we actually used earlier is, we talk about InsurTech. A lot of people say InsurTech is dead. Well, maybe it's just a terminology point of view, right? Because I've been talking, as I mentioned to you, to distribution platform, which I thought it was distribution tech. And then I talked to art platform, building really clever AI models and in the art tech, supporting insurance, right? So there is a reframing taking place to actually make sure that we're clear around the market we are going after and the opportunity definitely is going to be risk prevention, risk resilience, but there are other opportunities which may not just be for the insurer. It might be for the Sotheby and the Christie of this world, or for captive, players out there who are in the art sector, as an example with my AI tech example. Let's talk about model. You mentioned model, right? And right now I'm doing a lot of work in what we call the venture client space, which is when a startup become the first solution provider to a client, a corporate. So the venture client model means the client, the corporate, becomes the first customer of a venture, usually a startup or a scale-up. And so that is all about commercial partnership. But there is also a lot of things happening around venture client studios where you're founding those founders and you're building solutions to fulfill the need of the customer with a risk mitigation angle. So once upon a time, we had 12 months to build those products and services. Now we are in a probably 90-day sprint where we need to demonstrate value in 90 days. How have you seen change the way you potentially select, launch a new product or services to the market, but also make sure that, I use the word scaling, and you said, Sabine, we need to reframe, but how do we make sure that we drive that sustainability, that product market fit, but also the long-term viability of the solution coming to market?
I mean, it's a fascinating question, and I'm remembering the question is about the model. Yeah. Because I think if you want to solve a big problem, you need a lot more than 90 days. But I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that we're not able to articulate a big problem, which is why we've ended up with 1,000 little problems and an expectation that we can solve in 90 days. Because I think that solving is much easier than it's ever been. But I'm not sure that people are spending enough time. I think it's Abraham Lincoln, but one of your listeners might correct me. But this idea, if it takes 5 days to chop down a tree, I'd spend 4 days sharpening the axe. And I can't help thinking there's so much time wasted so much positive energy, enthusiasm, and expectation in startups. That naivety is wonderful. It's intoxifying to ignite a room full of people and to see 1,000 ideas on the wall. But then you get through it and you realize that you were learning by doing. And all you really got to as an outcome, so a big generalization, what you got to as an outcome is a slightly better brief rather than the answer. So now we've done that exercise, I wish we'd started here.
Okay.
And so I think it's a great discipline for iterative cycles. But I think the biggest thing we could be doing is understanding what the real problems are to solve.
Yeah.
Because the problems at scale are far more exciting than the small. I mean, yes, you could say, I want the phone to be answered in 3 seconds and not 4. How do I do it? And those very highly focused tactical problems, yes, they're the right thing for a 90-day type sprint. But if you are trying to break the speed of sound, or you're trying to predict a risk happening next year, and you've got to invent the data to get there, you may need to bring a group of people around a table who have never experienced insurance before. And you're going to have to invest the time and to define a brief and to reiterate that brief.
Yeah.
And accept that billion-dollar solutions don't happen in 90. I mean, I haven't had enough experience of winning at the 90-day sprint, but the stuff that I have seen and done myself, so I'll only speak from my own experiences, small brief, small win, short time, big brief, big win, big time.
Which goes back potentially to what we love calling the McKinsey horizon model, right? Short brief, probably shorter time to value, horizon 1, efficiency, innovation. A lot of corporations, look at capabilities to improve process, transform process, automate, which sits potentially in that sphere. Is why we've seen a lot of InsurTechs doing underwriting, claims, legal stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Then we have the product and services bucket, horizon 2, which I think is where you play, where you have been trying to challenge the industry by bringing outside in, thinking people not within the industry, but trying to rethink how the industry is serving its customer. These are more difficult, it just take longer. but also require a little bit more validation. And then the last one, which is business model transformation, where, can insurance transform its business model? That might be the question. We often say that regulated industry with product and services, it just takes forever, right? Because we need to make sure we don't upset the regulator. We need to make sure we are compliant. There's a right governance, and we actually meet a number of milestones. So what could be a fast lane maybe when we start looking at the studio model? And do you think it could be possible in the future to have that transparency, that validation, and being able to iterate with the founders coming from externally from the industry, within the industry, in a much better way?
Like yourself, I've been a student of all those models, like the Skunk Works models and the Unilever models and the P&G, all the P&G models of the 80s and 90s. And the medical models, which I based Gateway's original design. So, and they all had that aspect of external expertise, internal resource. Mm-hmm. And I think this is complex because it depends what you're trying to do.
Okay, well, that's fair enough.
And I certainly have found with if you're trying to prove top of the funnel improvements. Engagement, the repositioning, and you can test these things offline. You can test quickly, and you can bring in expertise of creative hooks and customer engagement, and you can find them in other industries, and they bring a lot of energy, and the things they try to test are quite quick, and you can test them A/B, and you can use marketing channel. It becomes marketing tests. I think the things that have been most valuable, the things in the Gateway that have been most valuable, have been where we've been testing ultimately the quality of the risk, the claims ratio. Mm-hmm. So there's one thing to say, well, of course they're new and they're fresh and they've got a new story. They're going to engage customers, and they all engage customers better than the incumbent industry because they're so targeted, they're so focused, they found a niche. But the real question comes, well, fine, they got the customers on board. Will this same customer start making much more claims than what the actuarial model has told us? And that has not been a 90-day story. Yeah. That is something you just can't prove. And we have formed a protective environment around that period that says, it was, yes, they managed to engage them. And then we have to ask ourselves, did they engage the right people or the wrong people? And with that, only time can tell, because we're starting to see the ratios go up or down as the way that the marketing is changing, till that is refined. And that refinement is an 18-month study. Yeah. It has to be, because some of these, even in motor, you might not see a claim for 3 or 4 years. So where's your data? So there's a patience required to try a brand new model. Whereas I think there are in the risk model side of things, we have a number of businesses that are purely doing either SaaS tools or risk models. Okay. Then you have, then you're really looking at just pure market traction. Mm-hmm. Is somebody buying a license to that piece of data? Are the feedback they're giving encouraging feedback or discouraging feedback? Are they saying, we'd love to buy your new offshore wind farm model if only you could give us an API that looks like A, B, and C? Or are they saying that conflicts our current way of working? So, and that is quite a quick read in the market once we find those founders and we can package them. So the market validation, I guess, is the piece I wanted to come to is quite different depending on what it is we're trying to test. Yeah. And I've certainly, I think we spent 8 years testing MGAs really, really well.
Yeah, and what is your view? Because I think it's super. Digital insurers are this year's hot thing, I've noticed, at least in the United States.
Oh, so good. Let's go. What's my view? I think it was a brilliant shot in the arm of energy. I think I think we were all very excited about those very disruptive models that they're bought by many, where we could see
many pets
niche,
now. Yeah,
a super niche of 1,000, aspects to this. I think some things I am excited about. I think we found some really nice premium solutions, and the MGAs themselves. So the insurance industry calls them MGAs. And rarely do I hear them defining themselves that way. So if you talk to Akita, they are underwriting carbon, or they are the risk partner for carbon. And the proposition is very much around navigating the carbon compliance and regulatory space as much as it is about finding an insurance solution at the back end. So I think each of those MGAs has found their own go-to-market language and service, and the revenue part of their, when you look at the revenue of the businesses, depending on which one of those MGAs, some of them is like 95% pre-insurance.
Interesting. So the service before.
All the service before. How to enable a customer to prevent and design out risk. Even flood flash was
to design out risk.
Designing out risk,
right? Because it means that you can self-insure or you can go for captive. I mean, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was reading about OpenAI, right? They cannot get insurance, so they have to go for a captive model. So what you are saying, you have that service part, and then it's about enabling and educating the customer up to the point that there may be an interest for insurance. It might be insurance, but it could be self-insurance, or it could be part of a captive model.
Or it could be just slightly less insurance, but to a wider market. I mean, the idea that we could take 80% of the flood risk out of a property, given a very serious problem, there's still a significant flood insurance and reinsurance opportunity there. Or maybe more importantly, we've re-engaged, what's the opposite to rejected? We have a number of groups that have been excluded can be re-invited to insurance again. And I think that is noble as a cause, to look at those who have been unfairly rejected now. Absolutely. Modern technology says we can make this fair again.
Which is important, partly when you look at the fact that you are focusing on protection gap. I am looking at the protection gap as well from a risk resiliency viewpoint, but looking at topics that carriers have asked me to evaluate a bit more as we move to 2030 and seeing a different type of risk. But looking at you and the fact that you can see both sides of the equation, working with the founders who are struggling sometimes to get momentum, but also working with the corporate who are craving uncertainty, but want to build certainty in everything, right? To actually see that sustainable recurring revenue model. What do you think are the ingredients missing right now to make, any one of those studio partnership models sustainable long term?
The simple answer is the studios that are out there today have all craved a big exit to prove themselves, to validate themselves.
Interesting.
I mean, simple commercial reality
is
if only we'd all showed them a unicorn for our efforts. And any studio's got a unicorn to say they sort of that's the validation. But I think it misses the subtlety of doing it right consistently. Your sustainability question is almost, I think, is one of how can we consistently build 50 great businesses through this model. I think it feels like less of a game of chance there. And I think that consistency comes from understanding at the front end is like, what's the right brief to put into a studio model? So start it right, enable it right. And I think that enablement is, the kind of culture of the founder, what's the word I'm after? The glamorization of the startup founder. There's so much required to make those founders successful. So I always feel the need, I'd much rather celebrate the studio than the founder. But you need to do that in a way that still excites everybody to want to work together. But I think it just requires so much support structure in terms of, both in terms of the emotional support, the insight into customer and making sure they have what they need, but also the people that have come out of the industry and spend enough time with them to build and pilot. And the opportunity for them to fall over. I feel like I'm describing a perfect playground where you fall over and you don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, and you need to have the space and the cushions to actually fall and, come back up. And it's interesting, this empathy and this emotional part of the equation you are describing, because if you remember Nectarius Lawyers, we're working in startup, we came together. And as we decided to go for our next projects, one things when I talked to Nectarius over the past years is one things we didn't look, and I have to admit that we didn't look during our accelerator programs. I was really demanding on the founders. They had to be ready in 3 months, and then they needed to find their funding the next following 3 months after the accelerator. And so we didn't really look at this mental health aspect of the founder where,
they have the right to fall down, and they have the right to feel unwell. And so one thing that Nexthouse has been working on for the past 2 or 3 years is that mental health for the founder, finding that space, because we get them the resources, right? Bring the accelerator. We show them how to work on their business model. We give them the tools to actually test and learn. We give them the tool to build a value proposition, to do the pitch, and to talk to the investor, and to talk to the corporate, and learn the language and all those things. But then we didn't always look. So that was, for me, the technical part. Perfect, 100%. But we didn't always look at the emotional part of that equation, because, it's lonely to be a founder. And I think it's probably lonelier to be a founder in insurance, because it just takes so much time to get that buying from the corporates. What have you seen from the emotional viewpoint, with your founders? How have you helped them cope with the transformation they are trying to bring actually in the industry?
I think I've got I think there's 2 ways of answering this. And as you were going through the example, I think if I look back on the last 10 years, I think the answer to how would I do it again is quite different.
Okay.
Which is why I was reflecting as you spoke. But I think that it's very common for burnouts in all startups, and that's part of the culture, that sort of living on adrenaline and the culture of uncertainty, and the excitement of the pivot and the positivity of the pivot, as in the pivot being, we thought we were focusing on this sector and we're now going to go to, or this solution, we're now going to this solution, or we're reframing our business model. That creative exercise being really energizing and exciting for people. And the one thing I have really noticed going through the sort of Series A, my own journey has been, I met 5,000 founders in this. I haven't met anything like that. I work in a team of met 5,000 founders, and we've turned that into 50 businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So, the selection of people with the right
5,050.
Yeah, you can imagine that the biggest skill we learned is those that probably can't do it because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's are these people fit to do it? Mentally fit, emotionally fit? Could they garner the support to do the journey in the first place? So that's the first and biggest hurdle, I think, of all of it. And then I think there's that just getting that. You question you asked me earlier. I thought this would be done in 3, and here I am.
10 years. Yeah.
10 years in, thinking, some things have worked really well, and some things I thought would go better. As in, there's a need to be adaptive, and there's a need, and that is different to resilience.
Yeah.
The sort of I'll do it anyway, as opposed to I'll have to adapt to what's been put in front of me. And I think that there's a third piece here which I have made this year's obsession, which is like. And I'm switching out of the emotional answer to the question. Which is, I think I realise now that when venture went quiet, venture capital has gone really quiet in InsurTech. That's the big change.
Yeah.
Like the problem's still there, the risks are still there, the protection gaps are everywhere.
Yeah.
AI have shown. So there's no problem there with sizes of problems. Is that venture's gone quiet. That venture spirit. And I don't think it was very healthy.
Well, venture spirit on the LP, right? Venturing require LP, and LP has gone quiet on the VCs.
But I don't know. I think my co-founders and we would sit in boards, we'd sit in round tables with founders, and we'd hear the feedback they were getting, which is, where is your ARR?
Yeah.
Like, you don't deserve your next round of funding unless you've got 3 million quid sold. And I'm looking at their business thinking, you don't even know what the risk is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're being told to go, and we're telling you to listen and learn. And so, and they've just put 15 million in, and we put 1 million in. So who are they listening to?
Mm-hmm.
They're listening, and they've been told to hire another 40 people. And I was just like, I just wish I could have cocooned them a little longer.
Yeah.
That's because what I wanted them to do is the genuine momentum that when it works, gosh, it works, is when they've come up with a new space. They validated it with the customer, and they validated it with the insurer by proving a claims ratio in the case of an MGA, or they validated it in terms of a risk model, and then they could really prove that they are reducing the net the risk in an environment, or in a piece of SaaS that can demonstrate real metrics of efficiency. And to have enough time to do that without being told that your next hire is a sales team. And that it was just fighting that culture through Series A.
Interesting.
And and I think I hope that as we come back to this space, we come back to venture returns. They're going to look at what their involvement did to accelerate, to shortcut the learning process.
Yeah.
That we all knew needed to be done, but we found it very hard to stop and listen.
And because the VC world, and even though that VC world may be operating into insurance markets, and within, the insurance ecosystem, they still think maybe faster time to market, when actually insurance, you'd call it probably the last mile, will take a long time, 18 months sometimes, to actually get into a deal. And often VCs do not always understand those timescales, right? These trust, resilience timescales, where, you really have to spend a lot of time with the hire for them to trust you and see that you're going to be there forever. And so then they may give you that trust, but it just takes a long time to get those approval points.
And that's not a bad thing.
No.
I mean,
but the investment side, investors always had difficulty to align with that timescale.
Yeah, that sort of. I'm sure there's other people that have articulated that dynamic better on your show, but the upside, the enthusiasm, the opportunity framing of entrepreneurialism and venturing gets everybody started.
Yeah.
Rallies people together. But on a bad day, the downside view. But actually, the long-term sustainability of any new category. If I said to you that here per mile insurance, classic example, will pay you 6p for every mile you drive for the insurance.
Yeah.
But first mile, you've got an unlimited liability.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what insurer would look at that and say, that's a brilliant business idea?
Yeah.
They look at that and go, that's absurd. Venture capital just goes, this is exactly what the customer wants. Buy insurance as and when I like it. We're going to have to force these guys over a barrel to do this cheaper. And the insurers look at you going, you do realise that you're just selling insurance piecemeal, and it doesn't work like this.
Yeah.
But culturally, those two never really sat around the table together. Even the VCs that represented insurers didn't put that foot forward.
It's interesting because one question I'm being asked this year is to, bring together a little bit more of my connections within the insurance carriers, within the Fortune 500 and the VC round table, so then they can become better listeners. And so that is what I started this year at, ITC Vegas, and we'll continue this into next year, but getting those different parties together to allow that conversation and actually allowing for reflection. And the main reason is, as we know, we are going through a major transformation. A lot of people are sitting and posing and waiting as to what is going to be the next revolution. And I know you told me that we are a bit too early for AI in insurance. I mean, we talk about artificial intelligence automation. Think about RPA, but let's put an AI layer. We are talking about artificial intelligence augmentation. So human in the loop, we can do better claims, we can do better underwriting, and we have this individual able to validate and approve things. But then there is something else around, those AI agents or agentic artificial intelligence, where we have a little bit more autonomous engagement into the process, which some industry will take advantage of, like tech, but maybe insurance may be slower to take advantage of. So what did you see? What do you mean by the fact that artificial intelligence in insurance may be too early? What is your view around that statement? Because we are looking at future. We are looking at future of risk and where innovation may sit in the years to come.
I don't know about I'll try and frame it in the incubator language, because I've been working in AI in the Gateway since 2018, 19.
Yeah.
So I think if you're just arriving at AI, you're quite late. The model, I think certainly even from a personal perspective, I'll start with a personal perspective as a starting point, but I've learned more about AI in the last month than I did in the 3 months before it. And I learnt more in the 3 months before it than I knew in the 6 months before that. So I think it's just the use cases and the speed of which it's proliferating now that what was, and I just take that as a pattern.
Yeah.
I just take that as a pattern to say that this is clearly going to be enormous and transformative. And I don't know what's the future of AI? I don't know, is what I really mean. I don't know, but I started early.
Yes.
And I have a play in just about every one of the things that you said. And our LPs have a play in agents and risk models and MGAs that have got AI through their blood as an ingredient in every part of their own value chains. Of course they have, because there were 3 founders that walked in the door, and one was a CTO that came from an amazing place. So it wasn't like, here are my 2 actuarial mates, we're going to do AI. It was, we've been talking AI before we came to you. So yes. I think they just have it baked into their DNA to start with. So they tell me more about, I mean, anything I tell to anybody that asks me, I picked up from a CTO being very kind and gentle and giving me some simple explanations from the real stuff that they're learning and doing at the front line. So, I mean, I think AI's became such a buzzword. We go to these conferences, and the queue to AI and insurance is the busy one.
Yeah, always.
And
it's
everybody
the
just wants a use
buzzword.
Case. We
Yes.
just want a use case.
They want to understand how to apply. 100%.
Yeah, and because we don't want to miss it, and I think I go back to the earlier point. The winner in AI is the person that can divine the problem.
Yeah.
We've got to spend our 4 days sharpening the axe. And I'm literally, and the only way to do it in my mind is to do lots and lots of experiments. I mean, 45 businesses with 10 AIs in each of them. There's 500 AIs I could find out about tomorrow, plus the other projects I do and the research I do at home. I'm surrounded, and always have been surrounded by AI. Why does it feel meaningful now? Because maybe it's the first time that insurance felt threatened about jobs.
Yeah, I mean, news of this week, AWS decided to make 30,000 people redundant within the corporate office out of 350,000 people. So that get people probably a little bit more, attention around the risk around job displacement that we've been talking about at least for the past 2 years. I think we are feeling it. I mean, 100,000 people have lost their jobs in big tech since the past year, actually, across all of them. One thing actually that come to mind is some of the work I've been doing with SaaS recently, where, a piece of study that they have actually published with the IDC. So IDC SaaS published a report called the Impact Study around data and artificial intelligence. One of the stats is very interesting because nearly 50% of executive or people out there are actually trusting generative AI, so OpenAI, Claude, Perplexity, to do their everyday work, even though they know of the error rate and hallucination. And generative AI is just a part of artificial intelligence, right? Machine learning actually are probably more predictive and probably more stable AI models. So when you start looking at, AI studio or building solution around all the AI ventures and use cases you have within the portfolio, how might you remove risk altogether when we start looking at the protection gap? What does prevention and predicting may mean in your world?
Oh, lovely question. Gosh, what does it mean in my world? I'll frame this in 2 different ways.
Yeah.
I met a wonderful founder, and he was wheelchair bound, and he was a developer. And he said, you don't think about these problems, but if there was a tornado coming, I'm not asking, am I insured? I'm asking, how do I get out of here in this thing?
Yeah.
And as a developer, in his head, he was thinking that the real solution for AI in this case was 1, to anticipate the typhoon, the cyclone, 2, to relate that to where he was, and 3, to personally address him get his attention, and give him a personal evacuation route from that moment.
Yeah.
And the essential things he needed to take with him. That was, you've got 3 minutes, follow these very clear instructions. And in that anecdote is a deep sense of trust, because this person has addressed you personally and said, I've thought about this from your perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously providing with some quite critical value, which is, well, it could be, don't worry, it's not coming your way, which is more likely. The message could say, don't worry, it's going to miss you by 2 miles.
Yeah.
You must feel terribly vulnerable right now because you're totally disempowered to do anything about this. And that conversation just blew my mind as the potential of, I guess, outside thinking, number one. But two, also, when I start playing the use of AI through that scenario, I got very excited about the preventative, the direct address, the ability to directly address people, and the fact that it was a dynamic picture. Yeah. And all of those things I want today. I can get it, we talked about Strava earlier, I get it from Strava, can't I?
Yeah.
I can get the rerouting through Waze. Why can't I be genuinely protected and supported in that same dynamic way? Because I would love a business that could do that for me.
And then we are going back into the service angle, right? Prevention, alert, using technology to provide the information to the user, the last mile, where he or she might be and who and she might have a disability, so that we can actually protect those people, right? The protection gap, the underinsured, or the understood from a product and service viewpoint. Yeah. So
I wanted the second part of the question. So I had to really think this through as you were talking. So I gave you an example of an outlier because I think that models are tested by outliers. Mm-hmm. So I almost started, in my head I was thinking, how would I create the incubator that would attract somebody like that to bring that brilliant problem? Yeah. Because then I would run it through the marketing, the forecasting modeler, the solution provider, all the other bits I went through, and the insurer. And I'd have all of those people trying to solve that. And by getting them to work together, I would have also answered another thing, which is how do I do that system at scale? Yeah. Because I now want to run another 1,000 problems at you like this, because actually what I want as an outcome are the rails of data, the rails of risk management, the rails of underwriting that comes from looking at super niche problems. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we can master that, so the way to master that is to test it with really hard things, and to invite people behind the scenes to really build the scaling layers behind it. So that would be my dream AI project. Yeah, find really, really hard problems and engage people that really understand the back-end systems, and then invite them to work in a reactive fashion, and then say, now design a system that would do this times 10,000.
Yeah. But also what you're actually highlighting here is, connected in some way the dot differently, but also creating awareness around problem solving, access to transparent data. I'm going to use data maybe, and I know you have a different viewpoint around, what data is in that scenario. But also, if you're able to get all these stakeholders around the table, looking at the problem in very different lens, it means that we have that feasibility, viability, desirability really knocked from an earlier stage. And I think, you said, let's start with the problem. Do we know how to define the problem? But then let's make sure we have the right party around, the right ecosystem around the table to start solving those most, important problems together. What that makes me think about as well is that's probably why insurance probably like niche MGAs, right? Because for them to build this type of capability would take forever and a lot of resources internally. So that is where potentially outsourcing this type of thinking would actually drive value in the industry by having someone think about the problem completely differently.
Yeah. And in a sense, MGA did give us a chance to pilot those kinds of ideas. Mm-hmm. Of course, you could build an MGA around that example, but it would be quite a small solution. Yeah. It would be quite a small niche global market, which has all sorts of troubles at the back end getting coverage, because you suddenly find you've got a global community. I mean, just following that one example, imagine you've got 1 million wheelchair users in 150 countries. Who on earth could support that? It's really, really hard. You couldn't even make that work in the US. that would take 2 years of going state by state.
Yeah.
So you realize that just by, I mean it to test, one tests the other. So it gives us the design problem. Recognize the world is going to be 10,000 problems like that to solve, not one at a time. If we see the world like that 10,000 micro niches, then it's worth building and investing
into the rails.
in a big global rail system.
Yeah, big global rail system. So another angle from the SaaS IDC study was the trust dilemma. Whilst I mentioned that 50% of us love using the Gen AI model, actually we are sitting in a trust dilemma where actually when we get the output from AI, we don't really trust the outcome because of misinformation and disinformation. So when we start looking at some of the research from the World Economic Forum, just this week, a paper came out around responsible AI, and it was sharing a framework as to how leadership is linked to initiative, which is in use cases, to actually delivering, the relevant product and services, and looking at it from a risk management viewpoint. How can venture building, maybe partnership, like the one you are trying to engineer within our industry, deliver and innovate ethically while still moving fast to ensure that we do not get lost by competition?
Several parts of that question, and I'm just trying to break it down because I think can we help build trust in technology?
Yes.
I think we have the great thing about having 100 MGAs is that you can test a new go-to-market strategy, a proposition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gives us a chance to reposition the same offer 100 times, frankly. So how we present SaaS, how we present any technology, should I say, or AI, it's 100 faces of potentially the same back-end system, in the same way that a motor manufacturer might have invested in a lot of engineering in chassis and drivetrain. They would have a studio that would develop a series of different models of car, from whether it be the hatchback or the estate or the family wagon. These things are all different propositions that have embodied as quite complicated bits of industrial design at the top end. But so I think that relationship between an industry building systems of scale, the chassis, the drivetrain, the thing that you could rely on and crash test and all those other bits,
Mm-hmm.
versus the variance and the style, the design, the things that fit to lifestyle. I can see a very simple parallel there, that studios can enable us to test personality, proposition, different way, or even different segments. If you were hanging, one thing I think that you discover very quickly when you're launching a new piece of technology is, I remember Buy Miles, they just assumed that the driver would be 21.
Yes.
And the drivers were 41.
41. Mm-hmm.
And you're like, how did that happen? Because 41, you become a geek about consumption and numbers and managing everything. And 21, you just want to get out and see your mates. And no insurer wants to touch. So you ended up with this surprise
Extremes,
about who your
outliers.
segment. Yeah. So it's like, we've completely got our market. We need to talk in a different way. We need different partners to help us get to them. And that's one example of it. And they all go through that. We thought we were for this market, and turns out we were for that market. So I think it allows you that quick pivots. I mean, it's so fast to do that now.
Yeah.
That I think, the relationships with startup founders on customer engagement, making connections or working with partners, I think we're a super easy place to do that.
So I want to ask you some really short, quick question. So the first one, it's like a lightning round.
Is that because you want short answers?
Well, if you want.
I'll do my best.
A lightning round now coming. So
yes, okay.
If there is one InsurTech you wish you had built, what would that be?
I still want to build that story of the disabled guy gets out of the way of a tornado. It's haunted me ever since I heard it 3 years ago. I want to make that
happen.
Yeah.
Which innovation cliche should we stop to talk about and finally retire?
The innovation cliche.
Or do we have innovation cliches?
No, I have to say I've struggled with InsurTech. If I'm allowed to ban words like Room 101,
That's a good one.
I'm really frustrated.
Because, I'm called the InsurTech Queen, and for sure I've taken that title.
You're definitely a queen.
Right?
Yeah.
But, the market has changed. I am in tech.
Yeah.
Supporting risk management and insurers, and I work mostly with adjacencies.
Yes.
So I mentioned hard tech,
Yeah,
cyber tech, AI. I would say AI tech because it's more than just artificial intelligence. And so when you start looking at all the agencies serving our market, wealth management, which, some broking platforms, just this week, started working with insurers in the US. So we need to make sure we don't constrain our ability to identify the right offerings for our industry, which often doesn't sit in the 7 billion of this year investment pool. It sits into the 1 to 2 trillion that I monitor, most week for the corporates I'm working with. So maybe it might be the InsurTech word.
Well, yes, I certainly thank you. Let's throw the word InsurTech in. I mean, I'm really stuck because the business is called InsurTech Gateway. Side of its times, I guess. But I do find it was brilliant at the time because that needed a label. So in 2017, it needed a label. And then it became borrowed by everything.
Yes.
But I look at the portfolio, and so little of it was about speeding up insurance. But anyway, I think there is. A conversation we had the other day got me thinking, and I wanted to say, I'll use this opportunity to say it, that one of the biggest challenges of innovating in insurance is that the people that really know what to do, I can't get hold of them. As in, I think we've created almost the perfect environment for innovating, in that they've got time and resources. But in truth, that incredible privilege is given to people with time already. They've got they've taken a sabbatical, they've taken time out, they've found funds to get themselves there. What I really want are the experts to come out of the market who really understand the business at scale. Yeah. And it's so hard to get hold of them because what you really want is those people giving you their time as much as the reframing, the creativity, the enablement of tech, but their deep domain expertise. I just wish there was more opportunity to use that. And instead of it being us and them. And I hear this, collaboration word used a lot, but that's what I mean by collaboration. I want an incubator that has people come around and give it the time and give it the respect, as it does in other industries.
Yeah.
Like the medical market, the chief executive looks at innovation of the medical company.
20% of their R&D is invested in that, right?
Yeah, and they sit on the board of it, and they inspire it, and they enable it, and until that starts to happen, I think it's going to be the inevitable is that you wait for the external industries to innovate, and insurance just has to keep up.
Yeah. So, can you finish that sentence for me? By 2030, only 5 years from now, insurance will finally be ...
2030 used to feel like such a long way away.
Right?
Yeah.
But it is around the corner.
I would love to say invisible. Because it's the word after seamless.
Yes.
But I think it's a sort of non-irritating. I'd love to think that we've cracked and that AI will help us. Sorry, this is a long answer.
Great.
Short answer is invisible. But what I mean by that really is enabling. It's the fuel for exploration. It means enablement of anything. And I think the next 5 years, I think we have the chance to definitely set the DNA of that happening. And by that, I mean people feeling that it's super easy or almost frictionless. That it delights me when it recognizes a problem rather than annoys me.
Yeah.
Did you know that you could do this smarter? Did you know that what you're about to do is pretty dumb and we could do it another way? Did you know? I think that opportunity is going to be big. Some of those AIs, if they get that right, the language models, the chatbots, of finding the right way to kind of advise behavior, not like a nag or not like a regulator.
It would be in your Apple Intelligence, I guess.
Yes, exactly. In
phone,
some way,
right?
in some preventative mitigation voice. I'd love to be a part of that. Put it that way.
Yeah. that is pure transformation, and we hope it's going to come our way. So, question for you now, if people want to reach out to you and want to spend some time with you, what should they do? Where can they find Stephen Brittain?
Where can they find me? Hiding in my shed, you mean?
Yes,
Where is my shed?
I know the shed.
Yes, we did a call for it the other day. You can find me at the InsurTech Gateway, and if you're a founder or you're an insurer and you're thinking about how do you innovate, we can speak about joining one of the programs, or when I say programs, you can join as an investor. You can help unlock some of the existing portfolio. You can directly invest, you can underwrite, as 75 insurers have done. If you are looking for more strategic advice, you can talk to me directly. You could find me on LinkedIn, Stephen Brittain. And otherwise, if you're looking for somebody to have a joke and a laugh with, you'll find me probably standing next to Sabine at the next conference.
Yes, conference, or having a drink somewhere in the club. Yeah. You mentioned the word invisible, seamless, frictionless, which are, I think, become keywords in our industry, and a lot of companies, insurance, do not know how to unlock it. When I look, for example, at just embedded insurance, it's predicted by 2030 will represent 25% of potential distribution by 2030. One new word I discovered this week, Stephen, is ambient insurance. And it's a little bit like invisible, but ambient means that you actually, because of the AI, you have a much more of a, it's much more embedded in your everyday. So I'm going to be doing some research around what ambient insurance is. Nice. And see whether we have now identified a new word for our industry and new product and services alongside embedded, frictionless, seamless, to unlock the 1.8 trillion protection gap. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Sabine.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them, and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also, connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.